Hello, beautiful souls. Thank you for joining me on the Divine Style. My name's Gerlinda, and I am a psychic medium, personal stylist, and self love coach. Today's episode is about a topic that has had one of the biggest impacts on my spiritual journey, and that is the topic of forgiveness. I started working deeply with forgiveness about 5 years, 6 years ago, with A Course in Miracles, and it had such a profound effect on me, not only because I've always seen myself as somebody who's really quick to forgive, but that there were so many hidden resentments I didn't know I was keeping. Not only that, throughout this journey, I've learned how important boundaries are and that you can't really set up forgiveness without a good, solid boundary in place. So, join me in this episode. I can't wait to share with you some of the tools and techniques that I've learned, and I hope that they will be just as impactful on you as they were on me. As a kid, I was taught to forgive and forget, that if somebody did you some kind of harm, that you should turn the other cheek. It was very much based on biblical teachings. And I guess now I have a completely different perspective on what those meanings are, and I will definitely get to those. But I am a very kind and compassionate person in general. And so if somebody has harmed me, I guess my way to make sense of it was to understand why they did it instead of necessarily putting up a boundary to stop them from doing it. If this has been you, I highly recommend actually starting to allow yourself to get into some anger work, because I feel that that was my biggest pitfall, was that I wouldn't allow myself to get mad at the mistreatment that I had. I would just automatically go into feeling empathy for them, and whilst this might seem or appear to be a really good quality, it was actually really doing me some, I guess, some soul damage in a way, because I wasn't actually allowing for true justice to be served. And often that's why a lot of people do hold on to unforgiveness, is because we want the other person to suffer. We want them to be punished, and we want there to be some kind of justice. But if we want to really live a balanced life, we need to have equal parts justice and mercy, and allow those two things to be simultaneous and be the paradox and be able to happen at the same time. We can actually offer mercy and justice can still be served. We don't have to be the punishers. And often, when we are the ones that are trying to do the punishment, it's us who is suffering. So, on the whole, forgiveness is definitely the way to go. But how do we do it in a way that's actually good for ourselves, our soul, and in a way that is going to protect us from being hurt again? Because I find time and time again that is one of the main reasons why people hold on to these feelings, is because they think that, well, if I don't forgive them, then they can't hurt me again. But it's interesting how the world works, right? Like, you might think that that person's not going to hurt you again, but there is sure to be someone else who will. And that's just the nature of being human. So, how do we go about knowing when the right time is to forgive? I know for myself, I really feel like you need to process what your upset is, where you're feeling hurt, what was the actual crime, let's call it a crime committed against you, and really go, what was actually happening, so you can start to have those self awareness and self questioning thoughts that allow you to know what boundaries were crossed and how has this affected you. And this is a personal thing. You don't have to share this with the perpetrator or the person that hurt you, but this is something that is just for you to get your mind around, to go, what is actually going on for me here? Because that's the most important thing in all of this, is you. What's going on for you? Once you've understood that, then you can start to go about the forgiveness work. Now, for me, I truly believe there are some things in this world that are actually unforgivable. Harming a child is one of them that stands out to me. And as a child, I was harmed. And so how do I go about then forgiving something that I think is unforgivable? Well, to be honest, I don't forgive the behavior. I think the behavior of, if I think about that certain individual, is completely unforgivable. Can I understand it? Yes, this person probably had something similar done to them. Does that make it okay? No. Can I forgive the soul or the essence of that person for actually not knowing any better? 100%. And that's what Jesus, I believe, meant on the cross when he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Because the these people, even ourselves, we go out into the world and we think we know what we're doing and we like to believe we do, but often we can't see the bigger picture. And so we're just going about trying to live our lives and get joy and get happiness. And some people actually, in order to get their needs or whatever it is they're trying to get met, they're actually hurting and harming other people. And that really needs to stop. And so I would hope, if justice can't be served in terms of legal terms, that justice will be served on a karmic level. And I believe that to be true. I believe you reap what you sow. And I feel like I'm like ranting on a bit here, but I really am passionate about people receiving the the justice for the behavior and actually having to face consequences, because we are responsible for our own behavior. And oftentimes when we've been the victim of any kind of abuse, we tend to end up taking on some of that responsibility as if we did something wrong, as if something was our fault. And that is so far from the truth. That is so far from the truth. We cannot control another person's actions. And I really just want to make that really clear, that whilst you might feel some sense of responsibility for what was done, even if it was sort of to the sense of, oh, well, I shouldn't have been, in that position, or I should have said no, or I should have kicked, or I should have screamed, or I should have done whatever it was, or stood up for myself, or put a boundary, it's still not your fault. And I really want to make that really, really clear. So, how do we start the process of forgiveness? How do we, once we know we're ready, once we've understand, once we understand all the moving parts and what was happening for us, how then do we go about forgiving somebody who potentially did something unforgivable? Or maybe it's just somebody that has really done quite a few little things, but it's built up to a big thing in terms of a big resentment. So, as I said before, the first step to forgiveness is to want to forgive. Now, the next step is to actually invite forgiveness into your heart. So, talking to, that higher being, whatever you may call it, the divine spirit, universe, and asking the universe to show you how to forgive, because there are many ways to do forgiveness. You can do forgiveness through EFT, so through tapping. You can do forgiveness through meditations. You can do forgiveness work through inner child meditations or inner child practices. There are so many different ways to do this. There's the Ho'oponopono prayer, so you can say that, the Hawaiian prayer, forgiveness prayer. I know for myself, I use a technique, or I have done it. I have used all those techniques, but I've used a technique where I've written down names of people I wanted to forgive, and then just burnt the paper to be able to just release that, not carry that anymore. And I now make it, I would love to say a daily practice, but almost a daily practice, to search my mind for anywhere where there is unforgiveness, anywhere where I am holding on to something that somebody has said or done. It can be really minor things. Maybe I've had a disagreement with somebody, and then I could maybe feel, upset about that. And instead of really carrying that, I can let those things go really easily. So, when it comes to forgiveness, there are so many different ways that you can do it. So, really going and asking, what's the best way for me to do this? And just wanting it in itself is sometimes enough to put the wheels in motion, so that forgiveness does just become a really beautiful daily part of your life and your work. Just like daily gratitude, daily forgiveness is another wonderful way that we can feel good about ourselves. The other thing just to make note of too when it comes to forgiveness is sometimes it brings about a superiority. And that's really not where I personally like to head when it comes to forgiveness, because it kind of then puts you on the pedestal saying, oh, I've forgiven you. And that to me isn't really true forgiveness. It's actually a more humbling experience where you sort of drop down to somebody else's level, like Jesus did at people's feet, and being able to surrender what you've been holding on to, and realizing that, hey, we are all human. We have so many faults, and usually people don't just act out of nowhere. It something has happened to them, whether they've got some mental issue or they've had some sort of abuse. And again, this isn't to condone behavior, but what I'm saying is when we do choose to do the forgiveness work, part of that will then be the understanding and being able to go, well, I don't need to accept the behavior as okay, but I can certainly come to some understanding as to why. And that's the part that I said that I used to miss. It was that I skipped almost the forgiveness, in the sense that there was nothing to forgive because I understood why they did it. But that then didn't allow me to put up boundaries. And that's why boundaries are so important. And I've spoken about that on a previous episode, that we really need to establish boundaries and knowing our emotions, and feeling our feelings to understand when they've been crossed. And then once we've understood that, we can forgive. And I really do believe the more that we can forgive from a wholehearted place with boundaries, that we are actually having that beautiful balance between justice and mercy. And I feel like the world would be a much better place if we could get that balance more correct, not just within ourselves, but the way that we treat others. And through this work, you will find that it becomes much easier to forgive yourself, because through that process, you realize that we are the ones that are judging ourselves. Whilst we might feel judged by other people, it's us who is judging ourselves the most. And even I was just on a walk this morning and I could hear, all these thoughts racing through my brain. And I thought to myself, hey, let's have a conversation here because you're going in a lot of different tangents. And it was just really interesting how we can pull ourselves up and we can bring it back, and we don't have to listen to those negative things that we're saying to ourselves. I remember one time I was sitting on just on the couch in the lounge room, and I just was so overwhelmed with how I'd spoken to myself, all the mean things I'd said towards me. And I just had this beautiful sense of forgiveness that was so overwhelming. I cried. But it was so wonderful to forgive myself for all my faults and let all of that go. And I really hope today you're able to spend some time in the forgiveness of others and also in the forgiveness of yourself. I really appreciate you, the listener, being here with me today. If you have enjoyed this episode, please make sure you like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. And also, if you'd like to delve more into self love, I have a free self love starter kit that's available at gerlindastella.com. I will put a link in the show notes for you. Wishing you a fabulous day.